Okay, so let's just unpack this right away. It is Friday, March 13th, 2026.
Yep, Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th. And we are heading straight into round 4 of AFT Dice Season 12. Now, I'm not saying it should be superstitious or anything.
But we are talking about a league that is decided entirely by the roll of the dice.
Exactly. If there was ever a day for critical failures or snake eyes or just absolute statistical chaos, it is today.
It really is the perfect narrative storm, isn't it? But, I try to look past the superstition part of it. The dice don't know what date it is.
No, they don't.
However, the players absolutely do. The coaches do. And we're at a point in the season now, round 4, where the sample size is, it's just starting to become significant. We're moving past that kind of random noise of the first few weeks.
Right. And that's the big question for our deep dive today. We're deep enough into the season that we really have to ask, are the early trends we're seeing actually real? We have teams that are undefeated. We have teams that literally haven't won a single roll yet. And our mission today is to figure out if this is actual team identity or just early season variance.
Precisely. So we're going to categorize all 9 of these matchups to see what the probability curves are actually telling us. We've got the Titans at the top of the table. We've got the really desperate 0-3 teams who are statistically just staring into the abyss. And of course, we're going to do a very specific granular breakdown for you regarding the Gold Coast Suns.
Which is the one I am personally most anxious about, frankly.
I know you are.
But before we get to the Suns, let's just look at the landscape for a second. The fixture list for round 4 is brutal. It feels like the algorithm that generates the schedule it decided to take the training wheels completely off.
It's a stress test. I think that's the best way to describe it. You have a very clear separation forming right now. There's a top tier and a bottom tier.
Yeah.
And usually around round 4 or round 5, we start to see what we call a regression to the mean.
Right. The lucky teams come back to earth.
Exactly. And the unlucky teams finally start to catch a few breaks.
Unless they aren't actually lucky. Unless they're just genuinely good. So let's dive right into the deep end here. Segment 1, the real deal tests. These are the clashes right at the top of the table. And honestly, I want to start out west. We've got the West Coast Eagles hosting Essendon at Optus Stadium.
Yeah, this is a fascinating data set. Both of these teams are 2-1, so they're sitting at a .667 winning percentage.
Yep.
But you really have to look at the home modifier here. Optus Stadium has been acting like a total fortress. The defensive roles for West Coast at home are statistically, well, they're significantly higher than the league average.
But hold on a second. I know Optus is tough. Everyone knows that. But Essendon isn't just winning games. They've got legitimate momentum right now. They've won rounds 2 and 3 back-to-back.
They have.
And the data shows they're actually winning on the road. So my question is the home fortress narrative actually true in this specific matchup, or is Essendon's road form a legitimate counterbalance?
That is the core conflict of this game. In a dice league, the venue often dictates the difficulty class of the roll, to borrow a tabletop gaming term. Optus imposes a pretty harsh penalty on visiting teams. However, if you look at Essendon's last 2 weeks, they are rolling well above the standard deviation when they travel.
So they aren't rattled by the away modifiers?
Not at all. They're playing right through them.
See, I'm a bit skeptical. I feel like road form in a dice game is kind of a fallacy. Like, is it actual skill, or did they just get lucky twice in a row? Because if West Coast has a tangible home ground advantage, like an actual mathematical plus modifier on their rolls, I just don't see how Essendon's good vibes overcome that math.
Well, it's not just vibes, though. It's their consistency.
Yeah.
Essendon's variance is significantly lower than average. They aren't out there rolling 1s and 12s. They're just consistently hitting 7s, 8s, and 9s. West Coast, on the other hand, relies a lot on massive spikes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right, so if Essendon grinds this out and somehow wins at Optus, suddenly they aren't just a fun 2-1 team, they're a legitimate title threat, because that kind of consistency travels anywhere.
Okay, so it's a classic high ceiling with West Coast versus high floor with Essendon. I can see that. And if West Coast holds the line, it just reinforces that you do not bet against the house at Optus.
Exactly.
Let's move to another massive clash, Marvel Stadium. We've got the Adelaide Crows versus Hawthorn. Adelaide is 3-0. They're leading the ladder, and they just look perfect right now.
On paper, they are the efficiency kings of the league right now. But Hawthorn presents a very specific problem for them. Hawthorn is 2-1, but they're coming off a heavy, heavy loss at GMHBA Stadium.
Calling it heavy is putting it politely, to be honest. They got absolutely crushed.
They did. Now, usually, when a team suffers a statistical blowout of that magnitude, the models suggest a bounce back is coming. It's the classic dead cat bounce theory. You very rarely roll that poorly 2 weeks in a row.
But doesn't that damage the psyche of the team? I mean, I know we're talking about dice here, but the players actually rolling them are human beings. If you just rolled 3 snake eyes in a row last week, aren't you going to be a bit hesitant?
You'd think so, yeah.
Aren't you going to start playing safer, lower yield strategies just to avoid getting embarrassed again?
That's the real danger for Hawthorn. Because if they play conservative, just to avoid another blowout, Adelaide is just going to steamroll them. Adelaide's out there playing with house money confidence. They are taking these risky, high-reward rolls specifically because they haven't been punished for it yet.
So this is basically a heat check for Adelaide.
Ideally, yes.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, Hawthorn is technically the home team here, even though it's Marvel and it's a shared venue.
Yeah.
But the crowd environment is going to be relatively neutral. If Adelaide goes into Marvel against a wounded Hawthorn team and dominates them again, I think we have to stop calling them a good team and start calling them the runaway favorite for the flag.
It feels like Adelaide is due for a regression, though. I mean, 3-0 with that massive percentage. The math has to catch up to them eventually.
It definitely does. But the question is, will it be this week? Hawthorn really needs to force high-variance rolls to disrupt Adelaide's rhythm. If they just try to play a standard, normal game, Adelaide wins on pure efficiency.
Let's hit the third big game in this top bracket. Richmond versus Port Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval. Richmond is also 3-0. And they look terrifying. Port is struggling at 1-2.
This right here is the absolute definition of a trap game. Richmond is absolutely flying. They just beat the Suns, which we will definitely discuss later, and they look completely unbeatable. But they're going into the Adelaide Oval, and that venue is a cauldron.
And Port is desperate right now. Being 1-2 isn't a death sentence, obviously, but 1-3 starts to look really ugly for your playoff chances.
Precisely. And look at the matchup from a stylistic perspective. Richmond likes a fast, high-scoring, high-octane game. Port Adelaide, especially when they're at home, they tend to drag games down into the mud, lower overall scores, much tighter margins.
So it's a complete clash of styles. But let me ask you this. Richmond is arguably the form team of the entire competition. Can a venue change really disrupt a team that is rolling this hot?
It can if Port manages to make it ugly. In dice terms, Port needs to use defensive strategies to just lower the total number of scoring opportunities across the board. If this turns into a shootout, Richmond wins. The math heavily favors Richmond in a high-scoring game.
Yeah, they're the firepower.
Right. So Port's only real path to victory is a low-scoring, high-tension grind, where maybe one lucky roll in the final quarter decides the whole thing.
A showdown-style boil-over, as the source material calls it. I love that. Chaos always favors the underdog. Okay, let's pivot. We've looked at the top of the table. Now we really have to look at the bottom. Segment 2, the desperation bracket. These are the teams sitting at 0-3.
The panic room.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, 0-3 is recoverable, mathematically speaking. 0-4. Historically, your playoff odds drop into the single digits.
First up in the panic room, we've got North Melbourne versus St. Kilda at Marvel. North is 2-1. They're feeling pretty good. St. Kilda is 0-3. This matchup feels like a live study in the gambler's fallacy.
Oh, absolutely it does. You have all these St. Kilda fans thinking, we are due. We can't possibly keep losing.
Right.
But the reality is, the dice have no memory whatsoever. The probability of rolling a 6 is the exact same this week as it was last week. Just because you rolled poorly 3 weeks in a row doesn't mean the universe owes you a win today.
That is the hard truth. But conversely, does momentum actually exist for North Melbourne? They've won 2 in a row very impressively. Are they actually rolling better, or is this just a random cluster of good luck?
The data suggests that North has actually found a sustainable offensive model. They aren't just relying on critical hits to bail them out. They are accumulating small, consistent wins across the board. St. Kilda, on the other hand, has been losing really close games. Their luck index, which is if you calculate their expected score versus their actual score, is very low right now.
So statistically speaking, St. Kilda should regress to the mean, which would mean finally winning a game.
In theory, yes. If they play the exact same way they have been, the results should eventually flip in their favor. But if they panic, if they start changing their underlying strategy just because they're desperate, they might actually ruin their own statistical correction.
Fascinating. All right, staying at Marvel Stadium, we have the Western Bulldogs versus the Sydney Swans. The Dogs are 0-3. Sydney is 1-2. Both of these teams lack consistency, and this just feels incredibly volatile. Plus, Marvel usually produces pretty high scores.
High-scoring games always increase variance. If you are the Bulldogs sitting there at 0-3, Do you really want a stable, predictable game? No. You want absolute chaos. You want a massive shootout where anything can happen and the numbers get weird.
But Sydney is one too. They're under a lot of pressure too. They really can't afford to drop this one either.
That's why this is a pure survival match. Because both teams are under pressure from poor starts, the tension is huge. If the Dogs lose this at home against a struggling Sydney side, the alarm bells aren't just ringing, the entire building is on fire. The must-win tag gets thrown around a lot in sports, but for the Bulldogs today, this is literally it.
And finishing up the desperation bracket, we're heading up to Optus Stadium, Fremantle versus the Geelong Cats. Fremantle is winless at 0-3. Geelong is 2-1, and they just posted their highest score of the entire season.
This is an absolute nightmare matchup for Freo. They are completely struggling to score. Their defensive roles have been okay, passable even, but they just cannot put points on the board. And now they have to face a Geelong team that seemingly just unlocked their entire offense.
But can the Optus Fortress save them? We talked earlier about West Coast having that massive home advantage there. Does Fremantle get that exact same boost?
They get the exact same venue modifiers, yes. But here's the problem. If you can't score, it doesn't matter how good your defense is or what your modifiers are. Eventually, Geelong is going to string together some high numbers. If Fremantle tries to get into a shootout with Geelong right now, they will definitively lose. They have to turn this game into an absolute slog.
It sounds like Fremantle essentially needs to hope for bad weather and terrible dice for Geelong. Not exactly a reliable strategy.
No, it isn't.
Let's move to the middle of the pack. Segment 3, the 1-2s and the 2-1s.
This is the messy middle. This is where the ladder is actually decided over the course of a season.
And we have a monster game here. Melbourne versus Collingwood at the MCG. Classic Friday Night Lights Victorian rivalry.
It's iconic, but you have to look at the context of where these teams are at. Melbourne is 2-1, Collingwood is 1-2. They're both coming off losses.
Right. And for me, looking at the sources, this game feels entirely about psychology. It's about who manages to stop the bleeding first.
That's exactly the key. Melbourne has incredible scoring power, but they're wildly inconsistent. Collingwood has been really up and down as well. When you have two highly inconsistent teams clashing at the MCG, the occasion itself becomes a massive factor. Who handles the spotlight and the pressure better?
See, I feel like Melbourne's best is significantly better than Collingwood's best right now, but Melbourne's worst is just horrific to watch.
That's the volatility we're talking about. If the good version of Melbourne shows up, they should win easily. The underlying math strongly supports their offense. But Collingwood is incredibly scrappy. If they manage to keep it close until the fourth quarter, well, we all know Collingwood loves a close finish.
Yeah, they thrive in that tension. Next up in the middle bracket, we have the Brisbane Lions versus the GWS Giants at the Gabba. Brisbane is 2-1, and they're coming off their biggest win of the season. GWS is 1-2 and winless on the road.
I'm going to say this right now. Do not sleep on GWS here. I know Brisbane is the clear favorite, especially playing at the Gabba, which is notoriously hard for visitors. But GWS has a very weird statistical profile this year. They are losing games, yes, but they are losing by incredibly small margins.
The close loss phenomena.
Exactly. In probability models, a team that loses a lot of close games is usually fundamentally better than their record suggests. They're just statistically unlucky. Conversely, a team that wins a lot of close games is often just lucky. GWS is playing well enough to win games right now. The dice just haven't fallen their way in the clutch moments.
So there's a real danger of the underdog here. If Brisbane comes in arrogant thinking, we just crushed it last week, this is going to be easy, GWS is perfectly positioned to just ambush them.
100%. If Brisbane doesn't respect the math, GWS will catch them out. Honestly, this is my big upset watch for the entire round.
Beware the unlucky team. I actually really like that advice. Okay, we have arrived. Segment 4, the one we have been waiting for. Let's talk about the listener focus for today, the Gold Coast Suns.
This is a critical juncture for the Suns.
It really is. Let's just lay it all out for you, the listener. The Suns are 2-1. They started 2-0. They looked absolutely fantastic. Then last week happened, a tough loss to Richmond. Now, losing to Richmond isn't shameful, as we said. Richmond is 3-0 and flying. But now the Suns are back at Metricon hosting Carlton. And Carlton is sitting at 1-2.
And this is what we call the response game. You learn almost nothing about a team's character when they are winning easily. You learn everything about them after their first loss. Did that loss to Richmond completely shake their confidence in their system? Or do they view it objectively as just a statistical anomaly?
And that's exactly what keeps me up at night. The Suns have been incredibly fragile in the past, we all know this, but this year feels slightly different. Metricon Stadium has been really kind to them so far. It feels like a safe space to reset.
Metricon is a crucial factor here. The data clearly shows that the Suns roll with a significantly higher baseline at home. And Carlton, well, the numbers heavily suggest that Carlton struggles against top-tier opposition.
Top tier. I really like hearing that term applied to the Suns. But are we actually top tier? Or was that 2-0 start just a massive fluke?
That is exactly what this Friday night game decides. If the Suns are a legitimate finals team, they beat a 1-2 Carlton side at home. There are no excuses. If they lose this and drop to 2-2, suddenly the entire narrative shifts right back to, oh, it's just the same old Suns.
Please don't say same old Suns. That phrase is permanently banned. But you're entirely right. The stakes are just wildly high for a round 4 game. So what is the threat here?
Look at the matchup dynamically. Carlton is desperate. They absolutely do not want to fall to 1-3. But the Suns have all the offensive tools they need. If Gold Coast can control the tempo early on, if they can just get a few high rolls in that first quarter, they can completely break Carlton's spirit. But if they let Carlton hang around...
Then the dice anxiety kicks in. I know it entirely too well.
Right. If it's a tight margin in the fourth quarter, the pressure on the Suns is going to be immense. They really need to put this game away early.
So, for you listening right now, and for me, honestly, what is the one single thing we need to see from the Suns heading into Friday night to actually feel confident?
Aggression. Do not play not to lose. Play to win. The Suns have the better statistical profile in this matchup. You have to trust the dice. Trust the system you built. If they play conservative just because they are terrified of losing 2 in a row, Carlton's desperation will create the conditions for an upset and they will punish them.
Okay. Aggression. I will definitely be screaming that at the radio on Friday. Just roll hard because a win puts us at 3-1, and that is a seriously strong platform for the rest of the season.
It is. 3-1 is genuine contender status. 2-2 is just mediocrity. This game is a massive fork in the road.
All right, let's zoom out a bit. We've covered all 9 of these matchups. When you look at round 4 holistically, what is the big picture taking shape here? Only 1 or 2 undefeated teams are going to remain, while 3 teams are currently stuck at 0-3.
I'm seeing real separation finally happening. That swing game concept is very real this week. We have so many games on this slate that will definitively shape the ladder and define the narrative going forward.
I want to challenge you on that. Which one is the biggest swing game for you? The one that most dramatically reshapes how we view this season?
For me, I think it has to be Adelaide versus Hawthorn.
Really?
Yeah, because if Hawthorn wins that game, the entire top of the ladder compresses. Suddenly, everyone is back in the mix. But if Adelaide wins and goes 4-0, while Hawthorn drops down to 2-2, Adelaide starts to look completely untouchable.
That's a great point. For me, it's actually North Melbourne versus St. Kilda. Because if the Saints go 0-4, we are basically writing eulogies for their entire season in March. But if they win, the bottom of the ladder becomes this chaotic, desperate scrap fight, which is honestly just much more entertaining to watch.
That really is the beauty of the dice, isn't it? We sit here, we look for patterns, we analyze all the stats and the modifiers, but ultimately there is always that element of pure, unadulterated chaos.
Especially on Friday the 13th.
Especially then.
So, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over while you're waiting for tip-off. Based on everything we've looked at today, does the structure of these matchups suggest that the dice are finally creating real, tangible separation between the good and bad teams? Or are we still in a phase of the season where almost any result remains completely plausible? Think about that as the games unfold.
It's the defining question of round 4. I think this is the week skill finally separates from luck. The genuinely good teams will win these specific matchups, and the pretenders will start to fall away.
We will see if the dice actually agree with you. It's going to be an incredibly stressful weekend, but honestly, that's exactly why we love it.
Absolutely.
All right, get your snacks ready, check your superstition at the door, or, bring it with you, whatever works for your team. Watch the Suns at Metricon, keep a close eye on that scoreboard over at Optus. Thanks for diving into the numbers with us today. We will catch you on the other side of round 4.
Enjoy the games.